there are amazing big organizations that are doing big impactful work, and obviously we're in a series of insane crises right now that
Mm.
can feel very far away and can feel kind of unsurmountable. But something is really appealing to me and feels very potent about finding what is really close to your home, close to your public school system, close to your local library, and seeing how to have, an impact in the smallest way, and then kind of going from there. And in that way, it feels like everyone can step in.
Welcome everybody to the Heart Coherence Collaborative. We are so excited. We have special guest Leah Song today.
Yes, we are so excited. Leah Song from Rising Appalachia is here.
And I am so excited to dive in. The reason why you're one of my favorite musicians is not just because of the music, but the message behind the music and all the incredible work. All right. I breathed in appreciation for good music
Me
as
too.
medicine and for Leah joining us today. So Leah is now going to officially read your bio.
Yes. Leah Song is a singer, songwriter, multi-instrumental musician, storyteller, poet, and activist, known for her role as frontwoman in Rising Appalachia, along with her sister Chloe, incorporating rhythm, the banjo, guitar, ballads, dance, spoken word, and storyteller into her work. Her music is based in the traditions of Southern soul and international roots music. Song engages in social activism and is involved with the environment, food justice, human rights, and prison reform. She's also been a speaker at TEDx. Leah is beloved by many members of the Heart Coherence Collaborative, and we are so honored to have her here. Welcome.
Yay. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to hear a little bit about like your origin story. What got you into music? How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks
Yeah.
for opening us on the heart meditation. That doesn't ever do you wrong, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I'm calling in from Southern Appalachia right now, and I was born and raised in like a pretty urban environment in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, and my family's still in the house that we were raised in. And we had this really interesting enclave in Georgia. I mean, I kind of straddle the world of the urban and the rural, and I love them both a lot. But we had a neighborhood and a community in Atlanta that was both right in the center of the city, but also a huge kind of folk artist neighborhood. And there were tons of folks in the neighborhood, my mom's parents, and not her parents, her neighbors. Our next door neighbor was a harp maker. There was an old time music community there. So there was a whole lot of music and folk art, a lot of Southern appreciation in the neighborhood that we grew up in. And then also we were children of the urban public school system, and enormous fans and friends of a lot of the both cultural and musical genres that were coming out of Atlanta as teenagers, and athletes and totally obnoxious teenagers in every form. And so we had like this swirling upbringing that had roots and branches, I guess, for lack of a better word. And both my sister and I really didn't take to the traditions that our family was holding on to. Our mom had a contra dance band, which is like kind of like the origin of square dancing.
Nice.
And it was mortifyingly embarrassing for us. And we didn't really take to it. We sort of went our own paths until later on in our adulthood. And for me, I left the house when I was 18, and I started traveling, and I lived in Latin America and studied and traveled really a lot abroad. And that's when I really began to return to the roots of our family's traditions, which I think is such a common story. We have to go as far as we can
Yeah.
before we start like getting curious about that. And so it was for me, um, although I was always very much in the creative realms, I didn't actually pick up music and lineage keeping in a lot of ways until I had left the house and started to travel. And then I wanted those stories, and I wanted the instruments, and I wanted the ballads
Mm.
to explain to people from all around the world like what the soundtrack of my childhood had been.
Wow. Yeah, that's absolutely what I was looking for in an origin story. Like I was looking to hear that, and that's amazing. It sounds magical, kind of like your neighborhood, your community.
It was magical, and it was also plagued by all sorts of teenage things. But it was,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so you get inspiration from so many different things. I would love to hear you just talk a little bit about your connection with the environment and how you kind of bring that in through your music.
yeah. Well, we've always we've always had a life where the local kind of flora and fauna have been really important to us, and that changes a lot because we're traveling a lot still.
Mm.
Um, so there's not necessarily a particular returning place that we've always had access to, but I think all of the band members have always kept our feet in on the ground, literally. And to be able to go out into today is a very beautiful day where I am, and right before this call I took a walk with my beautiful creature companion. And to just be able to like walk, I kind of consider walking a form of my meditation, and also a form of my prayer. And that's, if that's the one thing I can squeeze in before a show, or after a sound check, or in between a run of flights, if I can squeeze a walk in and just observe like what is growing in people's yards, what
Yeah.
is what is cracking the sidewalk, on the edge of the street corner, or how can we get into like deep forest in between shows or tours. We've often booked a run of shows, and on a Saturday night it will be that we fall in Yellowstone, and the music industry is like, it's Saturday night, we gotta hustle you to the next gig, and we're like, no way. It's a Saturday night, and we just happen to route through Yellowstone, and we're not gonna do a show that night, and we've done everything in a pretty upriver way to make sure that any time and any chance we get, we'll take a back road, or we'll stay at a national forest, or we'll just squeeze that in any direction we can. And I would love to say that we don't always have to squeeze it in, and we don't. Sometimes it's actually a really deep part of our season. But even when we are in full tour, we will squeeze in as much of the wild as we can, and it gives us resource.
Yeah.
I would love to go back to the time, because I think it's so interesting that you started playing late. Like I relate to this, where you abandoned the music of your parents and you do your stage thing. And then all of a sudden you come back. I mean, for me, it was probably like, oh, it's Neil Young, it's Bob Dylan, it's all, the things that you're kind of into as a kid because you're part of the family. But then you get into that like, oh, my parents and their stupid music thing. And then rediscover, oh my gosh, this is actually great music.
Yeah, they had like great taste. Oops.
Yes. Yes, my parents did too, really. And I love that that's part of my childhood. But I would love to hear about the start of it again, because it seems like you started then playing a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that all start where you're playing? And I would love to just hear the origin and creation of how you become a band. I've heard you say a project, which I love that you call it a project. But yeah, I would love to hear that moment, because a lot of people, I think, feel like if you haven't been playing since you're 6 years old, you should just never start.
Right. Yeah, our story is a really quirky one. So I picked up the banjo when I was traveling in southern Mexico, and I was living down there for about a year as a 19-year-old. And again, it was this way that I would have an instrument and a sound that reminded me of home while I was living and studying alongside a big indigenous rights movement, which is called the Zapatista movement. And everyone was working to uplift the story of this community that was being really trodden on. And when you're doing that, you start to realize, well, what is my story and what is my origin, you know? And so I started learning it in that year and just carrying it around with me and trying to understand the instrument so that I had something to also bring to the table to contribute, you know? And that was a slow process. That was not the beginning of the band by any means. We collected songs. My sister is 4 years younger than me, and she was still in high school and thought that I had lost my mind to be playing banjo, you know, traveling the world. And so she, many years later, 4 years later, when she graduated, came and traveled with me a little bit. And we started to realize, you know, if we know a few of our old songs, it means that we have a key to some different doors, you know, especially abroad, especially if you don't speak the same language. If you can sing a song and the song has its roots in your own bloodline, and I'm a huge fan of traditional music. I'm a big advocate of finding the old songs that predate kind of the authorship, and it's called public domain. And every culture around the world has traditional folk music. And so if you know a few of the songs from your bloodline and from your bones, you know, from your ancestry, there's something that everyone understands. It's an international language that you're kind of carrying a tradition. And so that began to open really interesting doors for us. We were young women. We were traveling on a shoestring budget. We had a couple of instruments on our backs, and we realized, oh, if we can carry some of this music, we could trade. We would trade songs for lodging sometimes. We would meet other musicians who would show us sort of the secret society of Bulgarian folk music, or of, you know, an Eastern European tea, like they have a big tea culture. Or in New Orleans, where we spent a long time living in New Orleans and traveling and playing on the streets in New Orleans. And you kind of have the keys to the kingdom in a way. And so we didn't really ever choose music. I actually have much more of a scholastic study in visual arts, you know, and so it wasn't music. We didn't choose it. It sort of like began to choose us, and it began to open the pathway, and we just sort of followed it. But I would say if there was a mark where it really began, there are two places that really come to mind, and one is this many years that we lived in New Orleans, and music is considered probably there more than almost anywhere I've ever been, like a cultural inheritance, something that we all deserve to have access to, and something that is our story. And seeing an American city that held it in such high regards was really impactful, because most places it's still seen as hobby in this country. So that was really impactful. And then we were invited as in the early days to sit on a stage at an event called the Atlanta Celtic Christmas, which was essentially like a Southern river dance, if you ever saw river dance.
I have.
Right, which was both exciting and mortifying. And we were invited to sit in and hold court, in a way, creative court, as the representatives of the Southern Appalachian voice. And, you know, that felt like a bigger task than we felt like we deserved, because we were both, you know, raised in Appalachian folk music, but also raised very much in an urban background. And also we had never been on a microphone, we had never held a microphone, we never been on a stage. And we were invited to sing a couple of these old songs that we were beginning to learn in front of about a 700-person audience in a stage with musicians from Ireland and Cape Breton and Nashville, Tennessee, and the country traditions and the traditional Celtic styles of playing and the bluegrass traditions, but nobody was holding the Appalachian traditions, which are older and more archaic, kind of more modal and obscure than what is considered American country or bluegrass. So they just, no, they didn't have anyone that could hold that space. And we couldn't really hold it either, but it became really apparent that there was a vacuum in those traditions. And so that was our very first time on stage, and it was just Chloe and I. It was before a band had been a twinkle in our eye. And we performed that day, that weekend, you know, and we just got so much strong feedback. And we were offered a record label from some of the other musicians, and we had just really, really, really strong support. We said no to the record label, and we kept it very underground and very grassroots for many, many years. But I think it was another one of those moments where we were like, this is an interesting position that we're being put in. And we are sort of second generation students of this tradition, if not longer than that. And so it became something that I think we felt a duty to, in a way. And many times we haven't wanted to do that duty. We wanted to lean into some other parts of our creative interpretation. But I think that has helped also give it drive for many, many years. So
I would love to hear how you deal with, you know, you hear from musicians that it's such a fast-paced life and it can be crazy and draining, and your music comes through so pure and healthy and vibrant. How do you stay healthy, and how do you deal with struggle?
And sane. It's not a very sane industry.
Right.
Well, we never took a record label. You know, we never did. We have been offered many different positions in different higher echelons of the industry, and we have taken management on, and we have a wonderful booking agent who's a woman who it's hard to find women in higher realms of the industry, period. So it's been really important to us to work with various different women in their own stronghold. But we started something called the slow music movement.
Yeah.
And that was just to create a template so that when we got asked to do things that felt totally insane to us, we could say, oh, sorry, look at this document. It's called the slow music movement. And it wasn't just us struggling to say no to things. It actually was a nice looking document that said, you know, many things. Here, we would like to have local food in our green room. We will not do something called one-offs. For many years, we wouldn't take a single gig unless we could take gigs in the region. That's often why we aren't able to do some of the bigger festivals in faraway places. Where are you all based?
Boston, New England.
I'm in Maine.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So in Maine, we did a sailboat tour.
Nice.
Oh,
We said, okay, you know, we'll go up there, but we're going to sail it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's so cool.
And so it's been honestly like a conversation once a week for 15 years, where we're like, all right, this feels sane. This feels a little insane.
Yeah.
This feels like it's going to push us too far. We're going to reel it back a little. And I think that if we had just handed it over to the music industry, we wouldn't still be here. So we've really worked very hard to have a long haul relationship with our craft, and that has meant that we've said no to a lot of things, and it's meant that you know, we're, I think, probably really frustrating to the music industry, but we're still doing it. And
Yeah.
a lot of bands won't, we still have our original members. Like, we all still take really, really good care of each other. We're tea drinkers. We push really hard to have our concerts start at 8. And, a headlining show is supposed to start at 11.
Mm.
So there's just 100 conversations happening all the time. And we sometimes don't win the battles. Sometimes we just take shows in ways that don't feel totally integral, but most of the time we try and steer it as best we can.
Mm. Yeah.
So how did you, this is a very unusual way to operate, especially most musicians, it's about, as soon as a label would want to offer you something, you would sign on. So how does this get created? Are there some things in your practices that made you a slow person? Was it your personalities naturally, and you came up with this document and this intention? What is the genesis of that? Because it's so unusual.
I actually think the genesis of it is that we never wanted to be like rock stars, and that
Yeah.
no one was like, I want to make it big. That was never
Beautiful.
ever anybody's drive, and so when things felt like it kept a head on our shoulders in a way. And Chloe and I run the project, but we run it in as much of a sort of democratic, diplomatic way as we can. But we stay in the driver's seat, and our boys, as I like to call them, our whole entire crew of incredible multi-instrumental bandmates are also really involved in all the decision making. So we sit and we talk through ideas, and we figure out who can handle what amount of touring, who can help bring in local nonprofits, who can help organize lodging on the ground that keeps us with friends, or in farmhouses, or in places that at the very least have kitchens so we can cook, and I think there's a few things that are tied in there. I do think it matters that it's women led. I also think it matters that there's not a one person leading it, there's two. And so there can't be that sort of egomaniacal kind of lose your head front center person. It can't exist. There's all these weird checks and balances that sometimes drive us all crazy, but it keeps you down a few notches from whatever that syndrome is called. It's probably got a lot of names. And also we are playing folk music, and we're playing the music of our parents, and our mom is 5 times better musician than us.
Wow.
But she's really shy and she doesn't perform. So we can get all puffed out and inspired by our rock star show. We have a couple of gigs next month at Red Rocks, which is as exciting as it gets. And then we'll go home and our mom will be like, your D minor was a little out of tune. It sounded pretty good. You did a great job. Could you finish the dishes? And there's definitely some elders in our lives that just keep a close eye on us. So I think the chance of us letting this get very far to our head is just pretty slim.
Yeah. You're playing at Red Rocks with Trevor Hall?
We are, yeah.
I think, when is that?
April 28th and 29th, I think.
Yeah.
There's 2 shows.
Are they both sold out?
I think the second show that was added late might still have tickets, so you guys should join.
We should join. And I have a funny story real quick I'd love to share. I had wanted forever to see Trevor Hall at Red Rocks, and I had bought tickets to go see Trevor Hall. It was my dream. I had manifested this forever, and I got sick and I wasn't able to go, but my friends still went, and they FaceTimed me from Red Rocks. And the camera guy recorded the FaceTime. He zoomed in on the FaceTime, and I ended up on the Jumbotron at Red Rocks while Trevor Hall was playing for a whole minute.
Really?
So it was I was there anyway. But I would love to go be there with you and Trevor. So we have to
Yes.
really consider this,
Yeah,
because
I think we should make this happen.
that would be like
Make
the
it
best
happen.
collaboration between
That's
you and Trevor.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to hear your inspiration. Like, how do you create the actual music itself? Like the writing, the music part between you and your sister, how does it all come together?
Yeah, we don't really have a formula.
Mm,
Um, Chloe and I do all of the writing of the songs. We put together the lyrics and sort of the rough melody of all the original songs. And then honestly, I like it when about a third of it is traditional, which means we're just collecting and learning the old songs. But, you know, sometimes she writes a song from beginning to end and brings it to the table and is like, bam, it's done. And it is done, you know, and sometimes we'll sit down and we'll work on like, oh, the verse, we've got the verse, and I'll put together some choruses, and then we'll take out lines and we'll change words around and we'll kind of workshop it back and forth. And every now and then I come out with a song that's complete from top to bottom, although sometimes they take me like 8 years to get there. I call Chloe I call her I call her the faucet. She doesn't think that that's a very romantic term, but I just mean it in the sense that she's like constantly flowing, and like the songs just flow out of her. There's probably a more endearing term for that. The waterfall, you could call it the waterfall.
yeah, right.
But we get the songs the way we want them, lyrically, and the rough melody lines of the songs, and then we bring them to the band when we feel like our parts are really clear, and then the band will arrange them and help us find tempos that we like, pick it up a notch, figure out where we want the drum. We have amazing instrumentalists that are, I mean, they're geniuses in their craft. So it goes to them, and then it kind of gets fine-tuned another layer. And then often we'll record. And then the final layer happens on stage, you know, we'll bring something that has felt very complete to us to a live audience, and all of a sudden it will feel too fast or too slow, or we'll realize that the tagline, the end of the song, actually needs to repeat double the amount of time that we recorded it. And then it kind of finds its shape, you know, with an audience. So it's a multi-tiered process for sure.
I am so interested in how you balance the relationship that you have with your sister as your sister, and then the creative and business thing, because I have this in my own life of business creative with a personal relationship. And I would love to hear how you guys balance that, because they're different things, and
they are different.
you have to figure out what the most important thing is at times.
Yeah, for sure. And the business can kind of like crush the friendship in a weird way. I think we're very, very lucky. We've never had a competitive relationship ever, even when we were little girls, and there could have been competition at all different phases. We've always been really different. Our personality types and our drive and even our desires are really different, and so we haven't had what a lot of siblings have in competition ever. And at times, you know, one or the other one of us have gotten really close to burnt out, and the other one will kind of come in and like take charge and hold court for a while one of us kind of loses it a little bit, you know. That's been an amazing thing. You know, we haven't ever fought that much in relationship, but we do fight some in business, and we have different things that we want to push for, you know, or advocate for, and we found a lot more kind of thorns in our relationship as business partners than we have in our relationship as kind of life partners. And we've always been close, and I think it's just an amazingly giving relationship. And I think we've always lived, we follow each other around. Wherever one of us moves, the other one moves. Like we've always,
Yeah.
we haven't gone probably more than like 9 months during the pandemic is the longest we've ever been apart, you know. And what we realized a few years ago is that we actually had to schedule fun time and kind of like date night together,
Yes.
Yeah.
because otherwise we would just work. And anytime we were together, we would talk about work, and
Yeah.
we would
Yeah.
work when we were on the phone, you know. And so we sort of schedule work. We work probably most of the time that we're together, but we schedule like sister date nights where
Mm.
we go take each other out and try and do something fun or sweet, or you know, take each other out for a nice dinner, so
Yes.
that we are planting the seeds for us to have and maintain a really important friendship. And that's helped, you know. That's just given us even more ways to make sure we can separate the two and take good care of each other. And it's helped a lot.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Are there any like dream musical collaborations you would wish to have unfold in your life?
Yeah, I really, really, really want to collaborate with Andre 3000 of Outkast.
Nice. All right.
Yes.
We're gonna send that out. Everyone in the collaborative that's listening and watching.
We can make you
put
heard
that
his
to heart and
story.
yeah,
He
send that
can
out.
make things happen, even if you're
Yeah.
going off track.
I mean, I grew up in inner city Atlanta with the entire underground hip hop movement.
Oh yeah.
And Outkast was as pivotal in my life as
Mm.
anything in the world, because it started to bring harmonica into hip hop music and Southern soul and like all of these sounds that began to bring me into an understanding of the traditions that came out of the South, you know, and the wealth of traditions that came out of the South. And I just love him. He's like
Yeah.
such a fascinating, weird art freak. And I
Yes.
very much appreciate that. So Andre 3000 would be mine.
Cool.
We did just work on an EP of covers that we're doing, that we're going to release
nice.
soon. It's a couple of different covers that are fun contemporary artists that would be cool to collaborate with.
Who do we have? Can you give us a little sneak peek?
Yeah, we're doing a Hosier song.
Oh, nice.
We're doing a James Blake song,
Cool.
which is, I mean, we're all kind of down tempo fanatics. So what we listen to and what we play are not like always the same realm. We did a Billie Eilish song. I'm not totally sure if we pulled it off. I don't know if it's
Which
gonna make it in getting older.
Oh, nice. Cool.
What else did we do? And we did an Anderson Paak song.
When does this get released?
I think we're shooting for the next 6 months. Keep your eye out.
Everyone
Once it's tracked, it takes a little while before it makes it to its final origin completion story. But that's been fun to start to get the music into other genres, you know.
Yeah. So Andre 3000 was your musical inspiration. Did you have like a spiritual inspiration, like somebody that kind of was a figure you looked up to in that realm?
Like as a young woman, you know, and well, interestingly, I would also say I was immensely influenced by Ani DeFranco, who was a musical influence, but also her way of living was a spiritual influence for me as a young woman trying to understand my place. You know, she started her own business. She traveled as a single woman, and she was very fierce, but also very feminine. And I found her realms as a teenager, you know, very, very influential. And then my spirituality kind of opened and continues to open and kind of blossom as I grow up, you know. I spent about a year living in India in my 20s, and in the time frame where Rising Appalachia was beginning, but we weren't touring full time. So starting to understand the practices of mindfulness and kind of like self-inquiry was really big. And I've just always had my own relationship with what the wilds around me, whether it's like my backyard in the middle of downtown Atlanta or whether I'm walking it through, you know, a deep jungle. I've kind of had my own direct line to whatever is happening out there. And I don't know what that would be called, you know, except for my own kind of version of spiritual and prayerful living, you know, kind of something much bigger than self.
Do you have practices that you do regularly? Like, do you regularly meditate or do yoga or do something every day or most days?
Yeah. I have a yoga practice. I have a meditation practice. They both kind of come and go, like the moon cycle, you know, they have swells and then they have like waning times. It probably depends on how hard our tour schedule is. And I think of walking as like a daily prayer, even if it's 15 minutes. I remember talking with a group of girlfriends who are all touring musicians, and my friend Naima, she tours with a project called Climbing Poetry. And she said, oh, I've never seen anybody have a walking practice like you. And she's like, I can tell that it's your form of prayer in a way. And after she said that, I kind of claimed it in an even clearer way, where I was like, yeah, this is some form of a moving meditation for me.
So I want to ask you a couple of questions of how we can support you specifically on your journey. And the first one I'd like to ask, are there any, because you're so involved with incredible groups throughout the world, are there any groups, organizations that you think need our support?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, there are so many.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Part of our relationship with the slow music movement was to work with different local organizations in each town, which has had a more robust chapter, obviously, before the pandemic. But to really learn what local regions were struggling with and try and support small organizations. And that's something that I really love the model of a lot is, you know, there are amazing big organizations that are doing big impactful work. And obviously we're in a series of insane crises right now that can feel very far away and can feel kind of unsurmountable. But something is really appealing to me and feels very potent about finding what is really close to your home, close to your public school system, close to your local library, and seeing how to have, you know, an impact in the smallest way, and then kind of going from there. And in that way, it feels like everyone can step in. I am a big lover of the food justice movement, because I think finding ways to support local economy feels very valuable. I'm also a really, really big believer in sort of our responsibility to be involved in civic duties, local government, or, you know, the local school systems. So in that way, like each person, each neighborhood, each family, each conversation is really distinct to what's happening in your own closest world. And I think from there's a way to branch out and then make bigger and bigger impact. But there's something really empowering about starting close.
Yeah.
I really love that. And I think one of the great books I read was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it talks about your sphere of concern and your sphere of influence. And it's often really just disempowering. If your sphere of concern is this huge thing, but actually you really aren't even doing anything in your sphere of influence, you're ineffective and usually angry and resentful. So I love what you just said, because there truly is this little place where your sphere of concern and your sphere of influence cross over. And if you focus your attention there, I think you can actually feel good, and then you can truly be affecting things instead of just imaginarily yelling at people on Facebook or having a lot of good ideas, but being a personal nightmare to people who live with you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. And that's what you see so much. It's odd.
Yes.
In the like new era of activism, which is a
Ugh.
really weird thing because that's been an important part of my life forever. But the new era of activism is that it's just got a meanness to it.
Yes.
And I think that it's losing a lot of vital impact if that's the way it looks. So I've heard of that book and I've never read it. Who is the author of it?
You know, I'm not going to be able to say it, but as soon as I'm not under pressure, I will text you, Kyle.
Perfect.
But such a really good book about personal relationships and how to be effective in a really good way in your life. So I think what you're saying, that resonates with me. It's like, just pick the thing you can do right near you.
Right near you. Yep.
Yeah, because otherwise I do think activism, it's become like this big empty balloon. It's a lot of feeling like you're doing something, but you're really just being mean or yelling at people.
On social media.
Yeah, and being very focused on the words that are not allowed instead of the kind, loving action that you can do in small ways.
Yep, I know. It feels like a lot of very leaky energy right now. And I do miss and hope for impactful realms of service in a way, you know?
Yeah. So the follow-up question would be, how can we support you specifically? I know things are changing now with COVID. You're doing some like virtual shows, different things. So how can our following just support you?
Thanks for asking. We have a few things coming up. Rising Appalachia has started touring again, which is wonderful. So we are doing selective shows. We're touring probably maybe a third of the amount that we were touring before, which has also got its beauty to it, you know, because we can all keep gardens. But we do have live shows coming. We have shows were stretched all across the year, so you can kind of follow our work on all of the various social media forms, and our webpage keeps a lot of updated shows. And we have a merchandise line. We have a bunch of homemade herbal medicine and art projects that are going. So that's really, really a cool part of it. And then we also have, sorry, there's a little noise in here. Can you hear me? We also have a small project that I'm part of that opens next week. So I don't know when this goes live, but we started a series of online schooling in a way with a project called the School for the Great Turning. And it's a project that myself and a woman named Lydia Violet are facilitating. And it's a multi-week course in ancestral lineage through mythology and through the arts. Wow. So it's sort of a way that I started getting involved in what I hope to be a different form of activism, which is helping each of us figure out our own ancestry and our own lineage. And from figuring that out, then having the tools and the resources to step into our communities more informed, you know. And I think so much is going on right now in massive kind of cultural amnesia. So it's a class that we put together to help all of us find more resources in our own roots. So that sounds
amazing.
Yeah, it's something I'm really, really proud of and really excited about. And it's not a musical project, but it still, I think, uplifts our way of having a cultural identity from all of our vastly different backgrounds, and that feels like it has its own tools to it. So
yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for bringing your authentic self to the stage. It's felt in your music, and it's something I've always admired about, like just the way you carry yourself. your presence is strong, pure, powerful, and it's just so rich.
Yeah, thank y'all. Thanks for having me. Thanks for your patience and my definite time management.
Oh,
At
same, me
the
too.
highest.
Yeah, we made
But
it happen though.
It happened in the exact perfect timing because this was just so perfect and lovely. Thank you for being with us.
yay, thanks for having me. Thanks for all the awesome inquiry.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're sending love to everybody out there. And thank you so much, Leah.